for your clear answers. Now we'll move on to the second question, which is concerning the topic of expenditures. Of any city expenditures of which you have found to be important and of interest to you, which would you change and which would you leave alone? And explain why. And we'll start with Carol. Do you mind, Carol? We can start with you. Thank you.
I think that the one tax that I would change, or not tax, expenditure that I would change would be subsidizing or giving money to the Chamber of Commerce. I think that should be a very separate organization, and because it has its own political status in the United States. And so I would not put money to support that. I would continue to put money to support, for example, quality of life through our parks and recreation. I think that Elgin needs to have a reputation where people want to live, and for example, parks and recreation would be one of those, as well as our basic services. There should be, we should never cut those.
Well, expenditures is an interesting question, and I don't think it's an either-or proposition when it relates to quality of life. Because quality of life has to do with public safety, it has to do with the fire department, but it also has to do with the kinds of opportunities we provide for young people and adults to have their minds soar and to be able to dream. And so I think there's a balance that needs to be struck in Elgin in terms of its expenditures and being able to support the quality of life that includes, yes, public safety and fire, but a whole bunch of other things too. We moved here from Oak Park because of the amenities and the quality of life being so high. If all we wanted was a fire department, a police department, and streets and sanitation, we could have moved to Gary, Indiana. But Elgin is very different than that, and I think that in some ways it's the best kept secret. I would support eliminating the support for the Chamber of Commerce. I think it should be a separate entity.
I think we need to differentiate between needs and wants. And when I went to the budget task force meetings, I heard repeatedly that the riverboat funds were used as a slush fund, so that when somebody would come to the council and say, some charitable group would say, I need some money, they could always say, well, we've got the riverboat money, let's fund them that way. Well, we need to go back to needs and wants. And that was discussed. One of the wants in the budget task force was leaf pickup. And that was one of the topics they had considered eliminating, but that never came to fruition. And now that certainly is not a need, that's a want, and a lot of people want it. I have a house with numerous huge trees that I take care of the leaves myself. That's something we could get rid of. We need to look at the budget, we need to look at the expenditures and trim it back to needs and not wants.
I think the biggest thing to keep in mind when talking about expenditures is where is our biggest expenditure? And our biggest expenditure is 75% of it goes to employee benefits and wages. Some of the things we've talked about already are smaller in dollar amounts that I believe are important. That with a council that needs to build integrity, you must build integrity even in the small items. So things like the Chamber of Commerce. Right now, the Chamber of Commerce, there's a member of the Chamber of Commerce that's suing the city, but the Chamber won't go to the city on their behalf in any way, shape, or form. Why? Because the Chamber is being funded by the city. Other things that we talked about was things like leaf removal. There's ways that we could scale that back to make that much cheaper. Snow removal is another one that we talked about when I was on the Elgin Budget Task Force. These things are all definite things where we could reduce our expenditures, but we do need to take a look at employee wages. Employee wages, remember that 75%, so that means both our union and non-union staff. We need to look at ways that we can reduce that.
Hi, expenditures. I agree that we spend a lot of money on our core services, and I think they're well spent. Unfortunately, my husband and I have had the need to use the police department and the fire department at our house, and they have been absolutely wonderful. And to cut back in those areas would, I think, would be a detriment to the community. us very well. There's a lot of things that the council that we can spend money on that we don't need to. Putting out something to find out if a hydroelectric dam is feasible in the community, spending over $200,000 for a study, I think is just not a good way of spending money, especially if it does come to fruition. Building it will take 20 years for us to recover any funds that we send that direction. And in this economy, it's better to take that money and put it on core services or something that the community actually needs.
Once again, I'm going to take a different approach to things. In the city, many different things make up the city of Elgin. We have the arts, we have the Elgin Symphonies, one of the finest symphonies not found in downtown Chicago. We have a lot of crown jewels in this town that we need to protect, as well as make this a place that everybody wants to live at. When I take a look at what I would stop spending, where I would make cuts, I would go in there with this belief. Stop feeding the pigs and slaughter the hogs. If you follow that moniker, the ones that are overeating at the trough need to be reduced, myself included, I'm working on it. But also, if you're a hog, and we've been supporting you for a number of years, you're going to get slaughtered. And I'm going to be on that team to do that so we can get this spending under control and make Elgin a place that everybody wants to live at, and equal representation for everyone in all areas of town.
It seems like the chamber has become an issue this evening, and like most questions, it's a little more complex than that. The city eliminated its economic development personnel a few years ago and has since relied upon the Chamber of Commerce to provide that service. And the Chamber is providing that service for a whole heck of a lot less money than the city spent on it. Additionally, it's more efficient. Now, I'm a fiscal conservative, so I think we ought to be able to do with less all the way across the board. It just takes a lot of work and some time.
Okay, another one of my favorite subjects. No core service cuts, obviously. Spending cuts do need to be made in economic times like this in departments that are not core services, and that's parks and recs, especially at the downtown rec center, and close and consolidate the east side rec center. Both of these programs or buildings alone cost us $1.2 million a year just in operational cost losses, not the cost of the buildings. We've got two economic development agencies in Elgin. One, the DNA, which I support. They have done a fine job with the money the city has spent with them. The second one is the Chamber of Commerce, which I do not wish to further support with taxpayer money. They were fully self-funded in the 90s when I was on the council. They are now totally funded by us, the taxpayers. That is not acceptable, and I do not think we get a good bang for our buck. There are too many studies. The study for the hydroelectric dam, $400,000. No.
Thank you.
We cannot make cuts on any of our core services. A councilperson at one of the meetings questioned a colleague of mine where we could make these cuts. He asked him in a condescending tone. He said, we can make cuts into our parks and our recreation department. We can make cuts into some of our into our budget. We would have dropped a lot of our money. We would have dropped a lot of our money into the East Side Rec Center, and we can't continue to do this to our finances. Thank you.
Spending cuts is something that I'm very passionate about because Elgin is greatly overspending. We've spent close to $100,000 on Hoffman Estates. Who here wants $1 out of each of your pockets going to Hoffman Estates? We're spending money on art space when the city is struggling to raise our taxes in order to fund this. We are overspending in so many different areas that we need to go through and we need to look at what are the recreation facilities of the city. We want to keep these, but Can we cut 20% of the spending without cutting 20% of the services? These are things that we need to look at. And as well as the fireworks and leaf pickup, which are both expenses that the city did not need to spend on, we're looking at the DNA, the Chamber of Commerce, that both do very similar things for a lot of the city's money and can both be self-funded. We do not need to be funding this. For every dollar the city spends, that's coming out of your pockets, and we need to reduce everywhere we can without cutting our major services and without impacting our quality of life.
First of all, we got to take care of the core services of the city. But where we run into problems is the city council spending $900,000 on the East Side Rec Center, including 26,000 rafts so the kids can fish in the retention pond. Why do we have Long Island? There's a total waste of money right there. We gave Bow Street Country Club, Powers Pub, $650,000. They keep the kitchen open all year. Every restaurant in town, like $650,000 to keep the kitchen open. We get, in past years, we gave a women's softball team $700,000. We couldn't pump every basement when it flooded. We didn't have no money for that. But we sure gave them enough bats and balls and so forth for $700,000. It's just total waste. Gave Hoffman Estates anything they want at Hoffman Estates. I guess when you have lunch with the mayor every Wednesday, you can get anything you want from this place. This is ridiculous. And you cut down off the spending, we got enough to live on. Woo!
One thing I would like to talk about is a rainy day fund. And John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, we don't have one. Is that correct? We do, okay. Well, my point is, let's use it. You know, we're throwing on taxes, we're doing the spending. The Elgin Chamber of Commerce, it's something that they've taken on some of this marketing. Coming from a background of where we're sitting on the Commission of Visitors Bureau board, we're trying to drive tourism to the area. Downtown revitalization is a huge thing, but we're at the point now where it's gone by for so many years, hasn't been done, and it would be great to have, for example, a convention center that would drive groups here, business, but are we going to spend on it now in this economic climate? Probably not. We're probably not going to get on board with that. But when we have things like a bike path that's anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000, bike path extension essentially, that, by the way the city wants to do it, could be upwards of $2 to $3 million. We have to really take a solid look at some of these things, and again, it goes back to fiscal responsibility. Where can we make proper cuts without cutting core services? And $400,000 for hydroelectric dam, not acceptable in my eyes.
Expenditures to leave alone core services. Keep in mind that all of our employees in our 3 basic core services have done without a pay raise until this year for 2, and some have gone with 4 years with no pay increase. Core services are the heart of the community, and that is what we're supposed to be in business for. Changing expenditures, the first thing has to happen, and I'm afraid it's only going to come in this election, we have to admit we have an addiction problem. We have a spending addiction problem that can only be cured by this election. Because if it's not done, there's so much, particularly the last 2 years of spending momentum that will take us right down the river. So what I would recommend is, yes, take a look at the non-core services. We're funding nonprofits at a rate harkening back to the day when the boat was giving us $24, $26, $28 million a year. Now we're getting 13. But we're still funding nonprofits at that same rate. Also, the East Side Rec Center and other duplicitous services need to be consolidated, or at least have a discussion about it.
Okay, the third question is going to be on the topic of business. And we'll start with this with Larry. So Larry, you've got a little bit of warning. Okay, so the question on business is, what has the city done to affect the business community, both positively and negatively? And what would you do to improve Elgin's business community? Larry?
Talk about being blindsided. I was a businessman for, well, a long time. And we always felt the best thing government could do for us is nothing at all. Just leave us alone and let us be in business. Our position was to provide products and services, employ people, make a better world out there. We were in construction. We felt like some of these high-rise buildings we put up were a contribution to the American society and scene of our time. I still feel that way. But government is best doing government. Leave it out of business. We can handle our own affairs.
Thank you. I'm a self-employed businessman. I'm in the insurance business, have been for 30 years. Way too much regulation, but we've done this now with businesses everywhere. The Elgin business license needs to be repealed. It's more of a revenue generator than what has been told to us. 2, the city has to keep and maintain its strong and great quality core services. People come to a city because they get what they need when they need it. And to get out of the way and not be giving subsidies. Finally, after some prompting, this council, following the prior administration, stopped giving cash to certain businesses in subsidies over other ones, picking winners and losers. This is crony capitalism. It doesn't work in the federal government, it doesn't work at the state level, and it doesn't work in your city, in our city. So let's not over-regulate businesses. Let's make it a business-friendly climate, and let's make sure that those core services are maintained and lower the taxes. Thank you.
Government does not have a place in business. The city of Elgin does not have a place in business. I grew up next door to Pat Keeney, who was a long-time businesswoman. I listened to her struggles every single day. I listened how she would sit there and tell me about what the city is doing to her and how she struggled during her retail business. My grandmother, she is an Elgin businesswoman. She has a shop at the State Street Market, and she tells me every day, she pays the Elgin business license. She doesn't like it. This idea that government should be involved in our business is just outright, I don't even have a word for it. It's just not, it has no place here. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
I'm a small business owner here in Elgin. I've got my own web design company. And before this, I've worked helping other businesses start or figure out what their problems are. And government needs to stay out of business as much as possible. Elgin is a great environment for businesses to come. We have the Elgin Technology Center, which is a great resource. We're getting so many tech businesses coming into town. But I've spoken to so many business owners who are unhappy with how hard Elgin is to work with. It's getting better, but not fast enough. We hear about one success story, and in the background there's 20 failures. If we have more businesses in town, we have more tax revenue, more jobs. More tax revenue means less that we each have to pay. We need to encourage businesses to come back here. We need to interfere with them less. And we need to make Elgin friendlier and easier to work with. If Elgin is more efficient, if Elgin is easier to work with, the businesses will come here, which will encourage more businesses to come, and that's better for everyone.
The local community leaders I talked to around it, the best thing they got going for them is Elgin. Elgin raises so many taxes, surcharges, and regulations. Companies say to hell with it. We'll go to Huntley, South Elgin, Hoffman Estates, whatever the case may be. And here's something real quick. The city raised the liquor tax 3%. The state came in and took away the video gambling. The video gambling we always had, it was called amusement only. Okay, so now Hoffman Estates, South Elgin, and all of them are getting those video gambling. And some of these give 5% back to the local communities. Before they raise their taxes again, they got to give us back our video gambling. So, and that could raise $200,000 a month for the city. That's what we need desperately. And that's what's coming up next month. We need to deal with that. But don't handcuff the business people. It's so much cheaper to do business outside the city. They'll get up and leave. And that's what these local bars are doing. They're leaving.
Well, I think that previously the environment was, a lot of people thought that the city had more of a hostile environment toward some of the businesses or new businesses. And I can certainly see some examples on why that would exist with the Elgin business license. I do, believe that somebody has to be doing some economic development for the city, and I know that's where that fee came about, but there also should be some accountability and some, just some measurability to what exactly they are doing to drive new business, whether it be downtown or whatever part of the city. But I spoke to the new owners, for example, of Chooch's Pizza. It's a new pizza place downtown. The climate is getting better. They said that, the city was actually very good to work with, so I was glad to hear that. But I think ultimately you just simply have to change the environment to a positive business climate where we just kind of step out of the way, let it grow, and change it from a tax and spend type of climate to where people know that it's going to be like that. They're not going to try to open a business.
I also am self-employed. As a matter of fact, I'm the only member of the City Council right now who is not a current or former government employee or retiree. I live and die on the free market. What I would consider the positive aspects of our business, to our business community is, we do have land. We do have vacant buildings. That can be a good or a bad thing. And we do have a pretty strong supply of water and the accessibility to get water, which is a big important thing to a lot of larger companies who come here. The negative things, they're here now and they're coming. They're coming with the rate tax, which is going to annihilate businesses. Businesses who dare to have a large parking lot for their customers or employees. Businesses who dare to have, like some of the other incentives I've agreed to, spec buildings over 100,000 square feet. Those businesses are going to be annihilated with the tax on their water bill because they dare to have a large parking lot or a large roof. Some of the things I would consider to keeping that are also somewhat of a positive that may improve, I believe in incentives that don't cost money.
I think the first thing that the city needs to do in the business community is to retain their current businesses. I think this is a business lesson that every business knows. You need to retain your customers or retain your employees first. So we need to strengthen the relationship. We need to decrease regulations. We need to make a more business-friendly environment for the businesses that are here. And second of all, I believe the city needs to have a vision for economic development in Elgin. I don't know who to leave it else up to. When I was in Chelsea, Michigan, I was on the city council in a small town in Michigan. There was no one in charge. No, the city said it was not our job. The Chamber of Commerce said it wasn't their job. There was no downtown association, and that community floundered. I think the city needs to take a lead and include the current business community as an input and look toward the future of what we would like our city to be economically.
Well, I think one of the good things Elgin has done, specifically related to the downtown business community, is the revitalization, the trying to attract new business, and some of the improvements they're making downtown. National studies show that you have to build a population in your downtown in order to make it vital. And unfortunately, because of what happened on the national scale with the economy, I think we got derailed temporarily. But I do think it's temporary. I think what we can do is remove barriers for especially for small businesses. And I think we need to start marketing and recruiting businesses to Elgin. I agree with Carol. I was part of the team that helped Mayor Daley's office in Chicago recruit Boeing and other national companies to Chicago in a work I did with a consulting firm. We need that same concerted effort here because Elgin has a lot to offer businesses who want to locate here.
Go ahead. Talk about a controversial tax is the business license tax. I've talked to some businesses downtown and they think it's just the cost of business. And there are other people on the other side that are absolutely rabid against it. So I'm not sure what to do with that, but I think the money should be, if we're going to give it to the chamber, there should be accountability on the chamber and what they're going to do with those funds. In terms of businesses, I would like the city to encourage businesses to hire local people as much as possible. We have a son getting out of the Marines shortly, and he'll probably be coming back here. I'd love it if he could find a job here in Elgin, working for an Elgin employer. Thank you.